Hello there, fellow citizens. Today I wanted to talk about medical gameplay. We got some more infos in the recent past, and also I think there are some interesting things to speculate about, and I want to tell you what to expect from medical gameplay, and also let me just dream up a few more details what I would wish for, how it would actually work in the future. So first up, let's start with a short summary. So medical gameplay will more or less be divided into two parts. You will still have your health points. These health points will be spread over your body, more or less, you can say. So you have your overall health, but then you have health for each individual limb and part of your body. And what health determines in the end is how long you will survive. So if your health goes down to 0, you go in the so-called down state. That's an intermediate state before you actually die, and you can decide when you're in that down state if you want to stay there and wait for help or if you want to respawn. The other thing that will happen are injuries. Injuries are more or less like debuffs. So if you have an injury, which can happen just when you have an accident, and they are localized normally. So if you get hit on the head, you get a head injury. If you get hit on the limb, you might break your bones there. And they will come with debuffs, like for example, you can't hold your gun steady, or you get a blurry vision or something like that. And these injuries, they can't be healed right on the spot. So that's the big difference. Health points can be healed with a med pen or a medical tool, which might just be a more efficient version of the med pen. But if you have injuries, you really have to take care of those to remove the debuffs that come along with them. To do that, you need to go to a medical facility or a medical bed, and these facilities, they come in 3 different tiers. So if you have a injury, that also comes in one of those 3 different tiers, and then you need to go to the corresponding medical facility. So for example, tier 3 injuries are least important. Tier 1 injuries are the worst. So if you have a tier 1 injury, you can't just go to a tier 3 hospital or to a tier 3 location. But if you have a tier 3 injury that's less severe, you can treat that anywhere more or less that you want. So for example, the Cutlass Red will only be able to treat tier 3 injuries, but if you go to a hospital like on Orison or something, they will be able to treat tier 1 injuries as well. Interesting about that to me was that in the video, in the stream, they were talking about the debuffs from the injuries, but there were a lot of maybes. So it sounded more like examples than actually already implemented stuff. So I'm not quite sure. In summary, it was said that everything that was talked about more or less will be the tier 0 medical gameplay and will come to the game with the next update, or well, 3.14 is on the PTU, so I mean with 3.15. But the way he talked about all these debuffs and injuries, it sounded more like it's still in the design phase, because creating all these debuffs is not a small effort, so I would expect that to take some time. So I'm not quite sure what we can expect there. We only have the health pool and the med pens like we have now, plus the added down state, and that's it, or if we can actually get injuries. Obviously, what does it mean if you have an injury? You can, and what does it mean to go to a medical facility? I think probably at the start it will just mean if you go there, it will be removed more or less automatically. Maybe it takes some time, something like that. But I would expect in the future that you actually have to perform surgery or some kind of operations to remove the injury. And that's where, well, the bread and butter of the medical gameplay will actually be. But before we get to some more speculation about that, how that could actually work, I want to get back to one other thing that I'm a bit, well, I'm not sure if I'd say worried about, but still seems a bit strange, and that's the down state. So the idea is that you want somebody else to come over and help you if you are, well, if you've died more or less. The down state is near-death experience, I would call it. because if you respawn at a hospital, that might degenerate your DNA, and you can only do this so and so often in the future. So there's a big downside there. Also, you might lose all your stuff that you're carrying with you. So there's a big incentive to actually not respawn, but wait for somebody to come and pick you up, which is totally reasonable. But what I don't really understand is, what are you doing during that time? Because, you know, in Star Citizen, especially if we get more star systems and all the players will be spread out farther, it will probably take some time for anyone to get to you and help you. I mean, if you're already in a group, you're walking around, they might just help you on the spot. But if you really want to say you're going somewhere on your own and you have to wait maybe an hour or even longer for someone to come up, that's a big question to me, what happens during that time? Because, I mean, normally the downstate means that you're unconscious, at least how I understood it. So you won't be able to use your mobiGlas, you won't be able to chat, you won't be able to do anything. It is more or less a black screen and some UI that you can use to select a respawn location or something like that, I imagine. And yeah, that doesn't sound very fun to me. I mean, yes, you can say, oh, well, if you go on your own, if you're going out alone, then that's on you. But even though I'm all for multi-crew gameplay, I think there should be a place and a time where you can play the game just on your own. And if your risk is so high that you have to wait or have to stare at a black screen for 1 hour or something like that, that doesn't sound very fun to me. So I tried to come up with ideas how this could actually work or be a bit different. So what could you do during your down state while you're waiting? Well, maybe you're dreaming. Okay, stay with me here. It sounds a bit out there, but it could be something interesting and not too unreasonable, that you can move through some kind of dream world or something like that, and maybe you can gather information there that you can later use. So imagine that you are moving through your unconscious memory, so stuff that you maybe have forgotten, and maybe there's some information you can extract from there that you can later on use. So for example, you overheard a conversation but you didn't concentrate on it, so you didn't pick it up, but maybe in that dream state you can more or less replay that conversation and now get some new information that could be useful somewhere in the game. So that's more or less like a small mini game or something. Another thing that could be interesting, if you had some kind of telepathy. I mean, I think many of you won't like that because, yeah, it's not very scientific, at least from what we know, but, well, it's science fiction. You have the fiction part in there, so, or maybe you have some cybernetic implants or something like that, I don't know, that will let you communicate with others even while you are unconscious. And maybe you can help them find your location this way. So maybe if you're in the downstate somewhere in a cave, you didn't drop a beacon there, so people can't just follow a marker on the map. So maybe there's something involved where you can give directions. Maybe they can share their vision and you see where they are and you give directions or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of speculation, but it won't be too long until we see it. I expect it just to be some kind of black screen and you're screwed, but, well, maybe not. I mean, at the beginning it's not big of a deal because you can just respawn. There's not a big reason for you to wait for help, but yeah, we'll see in the longer run. If you have any ideas how that works, maybe I totally missed something there. There's so much information out there and they already explained it. Please leave a comment and just tell me what you think or what you heard about that. Okay, so getting back to the injuries, how I would imagine, or I would say how I would like it to be. Okay, the actual gameplay of how you perform operation could be something similar like some surgeon simulation games that are already out there. There are quite a few that are fun, and I think it's just the right mixture of skill-based gameplay. It's not too complicated, but it's just enough to really do some cool stuff. And then depending on what injuries you have to take different procedures and stuff like that, and you have to treat those. Interesting idea I had about that was that maybe you have some exhaustion state after an operation, which kind of makes sense. So if the more severe the operation is, obviously the stronger or the longer this state will last. So if you just get a bandage or something, yeah, you can just walk out of the hospital. But if you had some severe head surgery or something like that, you will probably stay in hospital, or at least, well, take it a bit slow. So I could imagine this being some kind of debuff that decreases your stamina for a while. So why I'm talking about that, because I was thinking a bit about how very good skilled players could provide better surgery than other players, besides just killing the patient on the table maybe. So this could be an idea that if you're really well and you're doing everything perfectly, then maybe this debuff will only last a very short amount of time. Maybe even the length of the operation will factor into that. If you're really quick and your patient doesn't have to be so long under anesthetics, they will just have a very short debuff and can get back to work with full force right away. And if you're not as good, you take longer, that debuff will be longer. Another idea for that system is maybe if you botch the operation completely and you're unable to remove the injury, then you have this part where, well, okay, you can't do it right away again, so you have to live with that injury for a while. Maybe not with a full effect, with a full debuff, so it would be quite harsh if you've broken both your legs and you simply cannot walk, if you have to wait for that to go away a few days, but maybe you can't walk as fast because the injury was not that successful. And yeah, the last idea is, yeah, probably a patient can die on the table as well. I hope you really need to screw things up for that to happen, but I guess it also depends on how severe the injury is, so there's some risk reward you have there. Yeah, and maybe the tier of the facility you're working in also factors in that a bit. So yes, you can treat your tier 3 injury in a tier 3 facility, so on the Cutlass Red, for example, but maybe if you still go to a hospital, you will get out of bed quicker, and it's a larger likelihood that the operation will be successful without any side effects or something like that. Yeah, and last but not least, I think what's interesting is you will probably also have injuries removed from NPCs, and if these NPCs have different skill levels. So what I'm thinking of here is if you're going to a colonial outpost where there's some guy with that just taught himself how to do operations, it's probably quite likely that he will botch up the operation, or you will have more severe side effects there compared to if you go one of the very high standard hospitals on one of the landing zones or something like that. And tying in that, just another idea is that maybe you don't actually see these skill levels, but there's maybe some kind of Yelp for the verse. So you can leave star ratings and you can leave reviews and say, oh, well, this guy has no idea what he's doing. Don't go to him. And on the other side, you can also do that with players and leave reviews if they did a good job or not. Obviously, you have to be careful with that not to get exploited. Also, you have to think about maybe NPCs also be able to leave reviews depending on how well you actually performed your operations or something like that on them. And yeah, and last but not least, I think it would be interesting to have some kind of specialization in the medical gameplay. I guess that's way later down the line, because first off, you want the general most important stuff in there, but maybe you can become a dentist or a plastic surgeon or something like that, or a heart surgeon. You really specialize on one field. I mean, if the minigames are different for the different operations, that's already some kind of specialization, because probably you're better in some of those than the others, and maybe you just tell your fellow Star Citizen friends, come to me if you want to have head surgery. I'm really good at that game, but if you've broken your bones, please don't even ask me. I'm terrible at this. Yeah, so I think it's going to be really interesting. I really hope that we will get this interactive mini-game-ish gameplay for the injuries. To me, it just makes sense. I think that's what they are going for with the injuries, to have that as their own system, because yeah, it gives a lot more character to have different injuries and not just a number like health that goes up and down with all the side effects. And also it opens up a lot of variations in gameplay to make the operation gameplay interesting enough, because if you have many different injuries that all need to be treated accordingly, then it won't become as boring as quickly as if it's just the same thing over and over again. So these are my thoughts at medical gameplay, what we've heard so far, and also what I hope or think or speculate it might become in the future. Really hope that the first implementation will be a bit more than just the downstate and the health points that we already have to a certain degree, but we'll see about that. Shouldn't take too long, and yeah, hopefully we'll meet at a hospital, or maybe not. And with that, thanks for stepping by. If you like the video, considering giving it a like or subscribing to the channel. I'm doing a lot of these in the future, and a lot of other stuff you can find on my channel. And with that, thanks for listening, and see ya.